The Chosen episode 2 is appropriately titled Shabbat because the entire episode is centered around a Sabbath meal. Or really the build-up to that Sabbath meal, which is celebrated at a bunch of different households. And this week, I have got Brienne with us to discuss The Chosen episode 2. And as we did with the first episode, we're just going to walk through it scene by scene by scene and talk about what comes from the Bible, what's historically accurate, stuff like that, to hopefully provide you with something informative so that whenever you're watching the show, you know how to distinguish between what's fictional, what's scripture, what's influenced by scripture, what's referencing scripture, or what's just, coming from the mind of the director and the creative team, because that's kind of useful for something like that, hopefully, for those of y'all who are looking for a video like this. But this is actually Brienne's first time watching The Chosen. We actually just were in there. We just binge watched episodes 1 and 2. So I've seen episode 1 multiple times now. And we just rewatched. We watched episode 2. So what do you think about the show so far?
Yeah, I really liked it. Going into it, I didn't really expect it to be as high a budget because I've seen other Christian movies and things like that, and they just don't have as good of a budget, but it's really good production. They did a really good job. Yeah,
and it's amazing because it's all crowdfunded. That's even cooler.
Yeah, he told me about that while we were watching it, and that amazed me.
You mentioned that you really like the characterization in the show so far. So, having seen 2 episodes, who do you think is your favorite character?
I really like Matthew.
Matthew?
Yeah.
Why do you like Matthew?
He is a tax collector, and so a lot of people don't like him. So I think it's cool that they kind of highlight him a little bit more, and you get to see things from his perspective instead of from what others always think of him, I guess you'd say. So
I think that the guy who plays the part plays it really well. I probably should look up the names of these actors. I'm pretty sure I follow them on Instagram and stuff like that. I just don't remember their names. But yeah, I really like Matthew. I also really like Nicodemus. We get some good scenes with Nicodemus in this episode. And yeah, but that being said, let's just hop into the episode. The episode, Shabbat, it opens up back in 948 BC, I believe, at a place called Kinnereth. And if you want to know where Kinnereth is, it's just a city in Galilee, which is actually also known as Kinneret, which is where the Sea of Galilee actually gets its name, because it's also called Lake Kinneret, and that just comes from the word kinnor, which is a Hebrew instrument that's shaped kind of like the Sea of Galilee. And so they named it Kinneret because they're like, that looks like the instrument that we play. And so the scene opens up. It's 948 BC, right? So this is almost 1,000 years earlier. Right. And they're in this place called Kinnereth, and it is this boy who sees a star. And he starts asking about the Sabbath. And his mom explains basically the history of the Sabbath day, talks about rest, and is just telling them our ancestors have always celebrated the Sabbath day ever since, God created the heavens and the earth, right? On the 7th day, God rested, and he did that as a model for us to rest on the Sabbath day. Right. And so the kid's asking about it. He's like, why do we do it? And he's like, she's saying, that gives us time to focus on God, to celebrate our ancestors, to celebrate our friends, to celebrate our family. And basically it's just this moment where this kid is getting schooled on what the Sabbath day is, and also they're using that to teach us what the Sabbath day is, right? Because, especially as Christians and stuff, we don't talk about the Sabbath day a whole lot because that was more of a Jewish custom. I mean, some people still do it. I mean, on Saturdays, I usually don't do homework or anything because I think it's good to have a day off. And working at a church, Sundays are not usually my day off. So Saturdays I usually take as kind of a Sabbath day, a day of rest. And so that is scriptural. It's not based in the Gospels, but I think it's actually important that they made this entire episode about the Sabbath, because if you know anything about the 4 Gospels, the Sabbath day is actually very important, because it seems like Jesus loves doing miracles on the Sabbath because it always just frustrates people. And so I think they're laying the groundwork for that because the Sabbath's going to become very important going on, so they need the audience to know how significant of a day it is. It's a day of rest. You don't do anything. You chill out, right? One thing I did want to note there is I don't really know why they set this in 948 BC. Yeah. It was, I looked it up because as far as I know, King Solomon, he reigned from 970 to 930 BC. Which means this is during Solomon's reign, right? Solomon being the son of King David. But I don't know, this isn't supposed to be a specific person. There's nobody in the Bible who I could think of that stands out from 948 BC who would be asking his mother about the Sabbath. I guess they were just randomly picking a time period to reference, just to show that it's been an ongoing tradition for, thousands of years. But then what I did find interesting here Now, I know I'm lingering a lot on this first scene. Don't worry. We'll move on.
Yeah.
But one thing I did find interesting is that shortly after this, the boy's father comes in and starts quoting the Eshet Chayil, which is, it's Proverbs 31 in Hebrew, right? It's talking about a woman of noble virtue, right? The virtuous woman. You'll see that quoted a lot in girls' Instagram captions and stuff like that, right? Charm is deceptive and beauty is fleeting, but a woman who fears the Lord is to be praised. It's a very good passage, right? I get why people quote it. Sometimes they just quote it a lot, and I wish they actually just learned from it more. But the guy comes in and he starts quoting this, and I'm thinking, just chronologically, this is set in 948 BC during the reign of Solomon, and Solomon is the person who collected the Proverbs. He actually wrote a majority of them. Proverbs 31 is actually from the sayings of Lemuel, who we don't know who King Lemuel was. Some people think he was Solomon. We don't fully know. But I'm thinking, okay, so this is hot off the press. This guy was like, oh my gosh, I just heard Solomon quoting this thing. I'm coming in here and I'm going to start quoting it.
Yeah.
So I just thought that was funny because if they had gone just a little bit earlier, most likely he would not have been quoting that yet. But even on Sabbath days to this day, they do quote the Eshet Chayil. Whenever they're having the celebration, the father will stand up and start singing, either quoting it or singing it to his wife, which is actually really cool. So I just wanted to address that. I just thought it was a little fun fact because I was just trying to do the chronology in my head, and I was like, man, that thing was just hot off the press right then and there. Solomon was like, hey, by the way, King Lemuel said this, and they're like, I'm going to go sing that to my wife.
Yeah.
We're going to start a tradition right now. But then the scene cuts to an evening Sabbath dinner where they're quoting from Genesis chapter 1, talking about the Sabbath day and, just God's command to rest and stuff like that. And then they quote a common Jewish prayer, which we hear throughout the whole episode, which is, Baruch atah Adonai, blessed be the Lord our God, King of the universe, who gives us rest and gives us fruit of the vine, which is a traditional Jewish prayer that Jews still say to this day.
Yeah.
And then it cuts to the opening credits. What do you think about the opening song? We kind of talked about that a little bit.
Oh yeah, we were talking about how it's not something that's what you would expect to be in the opening credits. It's not like a traditional thing, but it works. I think it's cool. I like the fish and how they start to go the opposite direction and they change to blue. I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, so you have this fish swimming upstream and stuff.
Yeah.
I feel like I probably need to go buy one of those shirts, so that I can wear it during these episodes.
Yeah.
It's like the Get Used to Different, the Chosen shirts. But yeah, and then after the opening credits, we have the little upbeat song and stuff. Come walk on the water. We cut to Capernaum, and or as my Hebrew friends would correct me, Kafar Nehum, the city of Nahum. Right, so we cut to Capernaum, and now it is 26 AD.
Yes.
Right, which is a correction because whenever I watched this on the DVD, it said AD 30. We just watched it on YouTube. And on YouTube, for some reason, it says AD 26 versus AD 30 on the DVD. And I guess somewhere in there, they decided they wanted to bump this 4 years earlier. Just chronologically speaking, I guess they did more research and they were like, you know what, we think that Jesus probably ministered from AD 26 to AD 30 or something like that, as opposed from AD 30 to 33. That's just something that stuck out to me. For some reason, chronology is important to me. Yeah. And in the first episode, it said Magdala AD 2, like 2 AD, and then it said 28 years later. So the first episode was set in AD 30.
Right.
But now in episode 2, we're back in AD 26. But somehow, so it's 4 years earlier, but it's like a week later, so I don't know.
Yeah.
But I actually would, chronologically speaking, I would say that this is more accurate to probably the life of Christ. My seminary professors would disagree with me, because they think that he was crucified in AD 33, but I think he was crucified in AD 30. So you can go do that research. It really isn't significant. It doesn't really matter. There's no theological importance to that, but...
Yeah.
I don't know. I just noticed that apparently they did some research and were like, we're going to bump this back because, apparently they realized that David Tate was watching this and he thought their chronology was wrong.
Yeah.
And so, by the way, I'm David Tate, in case you were wondering. Hi, welcome to Now Let's Be Honest About Movies. And so now we're in AD 26.
Right.
So this is 1,000 years after the scene at the beginning of the episode. And we have Mary, who is helping braid a woman's hair.
Yes.
Right? And she is no longer demon-possessed. And things are going good. What do you think about the character of Mary?
Yeah, I think I like her a lot. Okay, I originally watched just the second episode.
Yes.
And, I understood what was kind of going on. And then I was like, I should probably go back and watch the first episode to, get some context. Once I watched the first episode, everything in the second episode made sense. I was like, why is Mary being highlighted so much? Why is, everyone coming and talking to her? Why is she kind of, the center of the episode? once I watched the first episode, I realized what was going on.
Yeah, I had asked her, I was like, hey, Brienne, would you like to be part of, like, the whole chosen thing I'm doing? Do you want to be part of the second episode? She was like, sure. So I guess she went and watched the second episode without the context of the first. And
I didn't know that they would connect that much.
You know, this is actually applicational for Bible study. Context is key. You know, if you're ever studying the Bible, what's the context? Same thing with watching The Chosen. What's the context? So, good job, Dallas Jenkins. You're teaching us how to study the Bible, even in learning how to talk about your show. Mm-hmm. Boom. There we go. So Mary, she's helping braid a woman's hair, and people like they kind of joke around. They're like, "Oh, Ananias is going to be the only person who sees my hair," because cultural context, women typically kept their hair veiled. That's why whenever you get to Song of Solomon, the book in the Old Testament that people don't like talking about, that's why he gets so excited whenever he sees his bride's hair. Right. Because back in that culture, you know, this would not be acceptable. So he's like, oh my gosh, your hair is like a flock of goats sitting from Mount Gilead. Because he's like, I've never seen this before. This is awesome. And so they're joking around. They're saying, Ananias is going to be the only person who gets to see your hair. Don't know why we're going through all this effort, but it's because she wants to look good for her husband. Yeah. And then, during this scene, a Pharisee is walking around. And he sees Mary. And you just see the look on his face being like,
am I seeing that right?
Yeah. Isn't that the girl from... Yeah. Isn't that the demon-possessed girl? And so you're like, oh, something good's about to happen. You're like already thinking, okay, how's this going to roll? Right. And so then we move on, and now we cut to Matthew and Gaius. And, you know, Matthew, the tax collector. Gaius, his kind of like bodyguard guy, the Roman guy, who I really like their... they're a little back and forth. But they're going before Quintus because Matthew he's following up with something they talked about with with Simon, not Peter. Matthew had talked about with Simon in the first episode. You know, because Simon had come up and been like, hey, by the way, Matthew, I actually created a deal with Quintus saying that, you know, like, I don't have to pay taxes. And Matthew's like, well, that seems awfully convenient. So he's like, I'm going to go talk to Quintus about this. And so him and Gaius go before Quintus. And sure enough, they do learn that Simon has been cleared. And Quintus is like, you don't have to worry about that. He's actually going to be trying to spy for us. So, and Matthew's like, I don't think he's trustworthy. In this scene, we actually get a lot of fun back and forth because Gaius is a little bit nervous. He's like, Matthew, you need to like calm down, man. You're going to get us killed. And then Matthew, he's just kind of, you know, I'm just here to tell you the truth. I don't think Simon's trustworthy. I think you're making a dumb business deal. Yeah. And even at one point, one of the Roman guards is like, I'm going to take you out. Like, you need to watch your mouth, Jew. But then Quintus is just enjoying it. He's like, I like this Matthew kid. He's a fun person. So how'd you like the character of Quintus?
He's funny. Like, okay, since he's kind of like the head honcho, you would expect him to be a lot more serious. But after seeing like his conversation with Matthew, I was like, he's a lot more laid back than I would expect. I mean, he means business, but he's a lot more laid back.
It seems like he just really likes Matthew's character, and he kind of appreciates the fact that Matthew's willing to speak his mind, whereas most Jews just kind of cower before them, where he's gonna like, you got spunk, kid. Yeah. I like you. I like spunk. We need that. Yeah. And so he eventually tells Matthew, hey, Simon hasn't fulfilled his end of the bargain yet, so we might be in touch. And as we're going to see over the course of the episodes, he's going to start having Matthew spy on them. Spoiler alert. Which, once again, none of this is from the Bible, right? Really, kind of like the first episode, none of the events that take place in this episode directly come from Scripture, but they are consistent with Scripture, and there's a lot of things that you can see how they're using it to set up events that will happen in Scripture later on. So as the episodes progress, we're going to start getting more into Scripture, but right now they're laying the groundwork and just letting us get to know the characters, so once we get to the Bible stories, they're more significant. Right. So right now, really, a lot of the stuff that's coming from Scripture is actually history. Right, so it's more Old Testament stuff that we're learning about. We're learning about the Sabbath. We're learning about the Proverbs 31 woman. You know, we're learning all that different stuff. And so he tells Matthew, we'll be in touch. And then we cut to Simon and Andrew at the tavern buying drinks for the merchants. Specifically, Simon is buying drinks for the merchants. And at this point, he is teasing friends, and he compares one of them to Absalom because the guy has really nice, long locks of hair. And I just wanted to address Absalom. Biblical character, once again, Old Testament, son of King David, not Solomon, but Absalom. He actually led a rebellion against his dad, and he was really known throughout the land for his gorgeous locks of hair. But during the course of this whole rebellion thing, he actually was fleeing, and his hair got caught in a tree, and basically he hung himself, and eventually one of David's lieutenants came and stabbed him and killed him. And David was not happy about that. Because he's like, hey, I don't care if he rebelled against me. He's my son. But that story isn't significant to this story. It's just, to this episode. It's just, it's a thing from the Bible. And so I felt like I should mention it.
Yeah.
So, there's that. And we do actually get a brief cameo from James and John here.
Yeah.
Because as Simon's buying all this stuff, he's like, oh, don't forget, we need to get some drinks for James and John as well. And I was like, aha!
Uh-huh.
Those are people who are going to be important in the future.
Yeah.
And so they run to James and John. Then Simon and Andrew, they debate, as always. Simon says that Eden and Andrew are his responsibility, Eden being his wife, which we did talk about that in the first episode. Biblically, Simon is married. But yeah, so they're having this debate, and Andrew's like, you can't betray our brethren, you know? You can't just go spy on them and, like, give them over to the Romans. And Simon says, hey, you and Eden are my responsibility. Yes, they're our fellow Jews, but I need to put food on the table for y'all. And so I don't care what I got to do, I'm going to do it. And so we kind of see their two different contrasting personalities. Andrew, he's like loyal. Simon's like, I'm going to do what I need to do to protect those closest to me.
Yeah.
And then we cut to Nicodemus now. And Nicodemus, he is doing what any religious leader who has recently failed would do. And he is sitting in his study, and he is studying and researching demons and exorcism.
Yeah.
Because he's like, man, I failed. I'm the teacher of teachers, yet I failed to exorcise that woman in the previous episode. So he's in there, and he's just like reading on, demons and whatnot. And then Shemuel comes in.
Yeah.
And he says, we like the name Shemuel.
Yeah.
It's got a fun name. But Shemuel comes in, and he interrupts Nicodemus. And he says, teacher, Av Bet Din wants to see you. And Nicodemus is like, what's going on? And he says, God is good.
Yeah.
And Nicodemus is like, what? Okay. And so then it cuts, and now Nicodemus is before this guy named Av Bet Din, which I didn't know if that was like a historical person or not, but I looked it up, and Av Bet Din, that's actually a title, which means chief of the court, and it was actually the second in command person in the Jewish religious system. There would be one who was over like all of Judea, there'd be like the high priest and then the Av Bet Din. This guy would not be that person, because there would have also been some in like different districts, right? So this is obviously the guy up in Galilee, right? So up in northern Israel, this is the Av Bet Din, probably of Capernaum or of just that general area. This is the second in command guy, and most likely, culturally, he would have been the most well-learned in scripture. And so I'm just sharing all this for those of y'all who want to know the cultural background. I find it interesting, and I think it's cool whenever people do their research. Like whenever it's a subtle detail that most people would overlook. I want to give credit for that, because there's somebody who put in a lot of research to make sure that character was there and he was accurate, and I appreciate that. So Av Bet Din, he is probably one of the most well-learned in scripture of the people. Nicodemus goes before him, and the guy says, hey, apparently there's this woman who has been freed of a demon. And Nicodemus is like, what? You mean Lilith? Nicodemus, he's beginning to think that he's the one who did it.
Yes.
There was just like a delayed effect.
Right.
Which is really funny, because in the previous episode, he said only God can free this woman of this demon. And also, he blamed her. He said, the reason why I couldn't free her is because she's just too sinful. It was like, classic. All right, just blame it on somebody else. And so, they're talking to each other, and he tells Nicodemus that she has been redeemed, and that the Sanhedrin down in Jerusalem, they're actually wanting to issue a formal inquiry. Like, they're wanting to look into this to see, can we record this as, an official miracle? Because this is unheard of. This is amazing. Nicodemus says, let me go check it out first. And they're like, why? Why are you nervous? You don't want the praise? He's like, she probably doesn't want to be overwhelmed, right? Let's just ease into this. Let me go look into it. And once I've kind of eased her into it, then y'all can come and y'all can do y'all's inquiry. I want to be certain first. And really, it's because he is so confused as to what's going on. Right. They're all thinking that he did it. He's thinking he might have done it, but he ultimately doesn't really know. So the guy tells Nicodemus, hey, you can go conduct your inquiry, but do it quickly, because news of this kind, it grows legs. So he says, miracles like this, people are going to hear about it sooner or later, so you don't have a very big time window to go learn about this, because people are going to notice that that's the demon-possessed girl, and they're going to want somebody to attribute this to. And they're going to hear about it, right? So he goes and he's going to be investigating. And then we cut to nighttime, and now we have Simon and Andrew again. And once again, they are debating. And they're saying, yada, yada, we shouldn't be doing this. We shouldn't be doing this. We need to do this, yada, yada, yada. Trying to figure out whether or not Simon should go fishing. Andrew views it as betrayal, but Simon views it as something where he has no choice. And Andrew wants Simon to double-cross the Romans, and just, kind of give him false information, whereas Simon's like, no, I'm really not in that position. We are poor. We need the money. We're going to do this. And then once again, we cut back to Nicodemus, and he is now at home with his wife, and he's wanting to just go back and, just go do some research. Look more into this whole demon thing. But then his wife reminds him that they have guests in the evening, and he's like, guests? And she's like, yeah, we got guests. It's Sabbath dinner. And you're the teacher of teachers in town from Jerusalem. People are going to want to eat with you because eating with you is like sharing loaves with God. And Nicodemus, obviously, he does not like being compared to God. He's like, what the heck, woman? What did you think about Nicodemus and his wife's relationship?
Yeah, I feel bad for Nicodemus because I feel like anytime he finally gets a second to, sit down and breathe, he's like, okay, we got to do this. And he's like, I just want to sit down in some silence by myself. He's like, I'm trying to get over here and study my word, and people come and interrupt me. I finally get to come home, and my wife's like, we have company coming. He's like, do I ever get a break?
Yeah.
So it's kind of funny, but yeah.
He's like, I just want to come home and do my research.
Yeah.
It's kind of funny because she compared him to me, because a lot of times I'm just like, oh yeah, I'm just going to go home. I'm going to get all this stuff done. And then it's like, David, you have this to do. I'm like, ugh. Yeah. Oh no, I've got to host something tonight. Oh, being social. But yeah, so that's where Nicodemus is at. He's not having it. He doesn't like being... you see him kind of becoming bitter about the fact that everybody's esteeming him so highly. It's kind of like his failure to cast that demon out really shook him up. And he realizes, I'm just a man. He kind of gotten on his high horse, and now he's realizing, I'm not as important as I thought I was. And so he's really sensitive to a lot of this stuff now. Like, he's like, no, it's not like sharing loaves with God. I'm just a human. But then we cut, and now we have Gaius, who is once again on his way to go meet with Matthew. And he breaks up a fight and stuff because that's what the Romans had to do. And whenever he gets to Matthew is actually in the tax collector's booth. Yeah, and he's bleeding, and he's beat up. Yeah. And Gaius, because of their little rapport they got going on there, he starts teasing him. He's like, so had some rough time with the civilians again, huh? Had a tough time walking through that courtyard. And Matthew, being Matthew's kind of, very straight-laced answer. He's like, yeah, yada, yada, yada. And they just start talking. And they have their typical banter. And then eventually something happens where I don't remember exactly what they were talking about, but somehow, I guess, the Sabbath dinner or just Matthew's family comes up. Right. And Matthew basically tells Gaius that his parents have disowned him and have said, we don't view you as our son. Yeah. And I did appreciate that Gaius here, even though they've had this banter, he's kind of just quiet there because you can see that deep down he kind of actually does care for Matthew, and I think they actually care for each other, and you'll see this throughout the episodes. It's like they tease each other, but it's actually like a Roman and Jew who actually do kind of grow to care for each other a little bit, and he's just kind of quiet. He's like, oh, that's kind of sad. Yeah. Which that's going to pay off even later on in this episode, where we see where Matthew has his Sabbath dinner, which is sad. But then Mary, she goes and she announces to her friends that she is hosting a Sabbath, and her friends tell her to get to work because there's a lot to do on the Sabbath. You got to do a lot of work in order to have some rest, right? And so they depart and they say Shabbat Shalom, which is basically, it just means Sabbath peace in Hebrew, and that's something that people still say to this day. And then this is something where hopefully I can get you talking here, because this is probably my favorite scene of the entire episode. Yeah. Because as Mary is departing from her friends, who does she run across except Nicodemus? Yes. Right? And Nicodemus, he runs up to her and he says, Lilith, Lilith, Lilith. Yes. And she says, I don't answer to that name anymore. And you can tell she's disturbed. She's like, I don't know why you're here. I don't know what you want. I just want to get away from the situation. You're bringing up some stuff that I've moved on past that. Don't remind me of that past. What did you think about this entire scene? Yeah, this scene gave me actual chills. Like, this is definitely my favorite scene out of the entire. And I can say after watching it the first time, without watching the first episode first, I was like, I had the same reaction, but watching it the second time after having context, I was like, wow, this scene is absolutely amazing. It was so good. He comes up to her And he's saying, I'm a Pharisee. I'm a Pharisee. I came and visited you. And she's like, I don't remember any of that. She says, are you really a Pharisee? And he says, yes, I am. She's like, ooh, puts the veil up because, cultural context. Yeah. Women, you cover your hair, especially amongst a Pharisee. Even to this day, if you go over to Israel, because by and large, after Jerusalem was destroyed in AD 70 by the Romans, the Sadducean party, like, they were the priests. So without a temple, they didn't really continue to exist or anything. And so the Pharisee party is kind of what eventually turned into the Orthodox Jewish community nowadays. And so you do still see very similar things going on nowadays where whenever I went to Jerusalem recently, there were some girls in our group who were wearing sleeveless shirts, right? Just sleeveless shirts.
Right.
But whenever the guys walk by, they will take off their hat and like hold it to the side because they view it as impure, and they're trying to be like, oh no, we need to cover up.
Yes.
Not just as a way, because that to them they're like, no, we don't want to lay eyes on like a person's shoulder. To them that feels sinful, and so I do like how even if you go to Israel today, you still see some of that same modesty and stuff. So I thought it was cool that they had her put her veil on. Not a very significant moment in the scene as a whole, but culturally, small detail. I liked it. They didn't have to put it there, but they did, which once again shows that there's somebody or multiple people doing research, which I appreciate. So, they start having this conversation. She says she doesn't remember him. She seems very confused by this whole ordeal. And she tells him, ultimately, that it wasn't anything that he did that fixed her. Because he's saying, well, how long was it after I visited you that things started changing? And she's like, oh, it wasn't anything you did.
Someone else.
And the look on his face is like,
what do you mean? I was here.
Yeah, it's like, who else was it? And then she says, well, it was somebody else. And then he's like, even more of a double take. He's like,
who's this person?
Who is this person?
Yeah.
So she says that he called her Mary and that she was his. Right? And this is something I never caught on to. I've seen this episode multiple times, but I never caught on to it until this moment. But not only is Mary remembering the whole instance here with Jesus, but she's actually applying what he said. This is like key discipleship, because Jesus, whenever he approached her in episode 1, he just quoted Isaiah, right? He quoted, "Thus says the Lord," and then it goes on. I have redeemed you. I have called you by name. You are mine. And all he's doing is quoting Isaiah. Her dad used to quote that passage to her all the time. She used to quote that passage, and it was always the Lord saying, "You are mine." But right here, she's talking to Nicodemus, and she says, "He told me I was his," which means that not only is she astounded by the fact that he is quoting that passage to her, but she has taken that to mean that he himself is the Lord. Right? So, like, whenever he said those words, it was supposed to be like, not that you are just God, you are mine. And so I thought that was like a subtle detail. Like, she could have just said, he quoted the prophet Isaiah to me. But instead she said, he told me that I am his. And I was like, wow. Like, she was listening, and she actually interpreted that correctly.
Right.
Which is, I just never noticed that little detail, but that's what she says. She says, he told me I am his. He called me my actual name, not Lilith, but Mary. And so he starts asking her, like, who is this guy's name? I want to know who he is, like, where is he at? And she says, I don't know his name. And he says, who does these types of things and doesn't seek credit?
Yes.
Like who does that? And this to me tied into something that we've gone through recently. We've been going through the Gospel of John in our college Bible study group. And there's a lot of places where Jesus, he's saying, I don't do things on my own authority. I don't do things for credit. The person who does things for credit, well, you don't necessarily know whether or not to trust them. This is like John chapter 7, John chapter 8, in that area. And he's saying, whenever somebody speaks on their own authority, they have a lot to gain, and therefore there's more room for deception. But he says, I don't speak on my own authority. I speak on the authority of the one who sent me. Because now I have nothing to gain out of here, because I'm not seeking my own glory. And so Nicodemus here, he's saying, who does these things and doesn't seek attention? Right. Like, the whole reason Nicodemus was seeking her out is because he thought he performed a miracle, and he wanted to know whether or not he could get the accolades for it. But then now he's come across this guy who she doesn't even know his name. Presumably, I guess, at the end of episode 1, they just departed without him ever telling her his name, right? And I'm like, whoa, that's so cool.
That's crazy.
So cool. He says, what's his name? She says, I don't know. Even if I did know his name, I couldn't tell you. And he says, why not? And she says, well, the time for people to know has not come.
Yes.
Which, once again, if you read the Gospel of John, that's a constant theme. His hour had not yet come. His hour had not yet come. It's in the Gospel of John specifically, it's talking about Jesus' death and saying his hour had not yet come for him to die, and so everything's happening according to God's plan so that There's certain things that people cannot know until it's time for Jesus to die. Where she's speaking about here, she's more talking about his public ministry, right? That, like, whenever it's time for him to be known, he'll make himself known.
Right.
Right? And so it's a little bit different than the Gospel of John, but it's the same type of theme, right? It's all according to his timing, according to God's timing, according to God's will. Even if she did know his name, it's like, that's not mine to reveal. He will reveal himself when his time comes. And that's when he's like, well, who does these things without seeking credit?
Yes.
And so then she gets to my favorite line of the entire show, and I want to quote it word for word because it's so good. She says,
I was one way, and now I am completely different. And the thing that happened in between was him. So yes, I will know him for the rest of my life.
Before you said that was my favorite, I was going to make sure to mention that, because that was my favorite part of that entire scene.
Yeah, and that should be a scene. Like, honestly, we should all probably memorize that, because if you want to share your testimony with somebody in, like, 2 sentences,
that's it.
That's probably it, right? I mean, for every single Christian, that should be the way we should be able to describe Christ, right? I was one way, but now I'm different, and the only thing in between was him. So yes, I will know him the rest of my life. Like, that's a perfect example of it, right? We all have different stories, right? We all have different backgrounds. I got saved when I was 5 years old. Doesn't mean I've been perfect. Lord knows I'm not perfect at all. But every single day, I'm being changed by him, and I'm growing in him. And I can even say, my 5-year-old self, there was this before Christ and this after Christ, where it's like, okay, I was one way, now I'm different.
Yes.
And I will know him the rest of my life, right? Even now, whenever I spend more and more time with Jesus, when I spend more time in his word, when I spend more time in prayer, when I spend more time doing ministry, heck, even doing videos like this, when I do stuff like that, he's changing us. And he's striving to conform us more and more closely to him. And so, yeah, I was one way, now I'm different. The only thing in between is him. We can't be changed by anything else, right? Nicodemus, you didn't save me from that demon, right? No, the only thing that happened in between was him. He called me by name. He said, I'm his, right? And that's like, it's the story of the gospel there, very beautifully interweaved in there, to where really every single Christian should be able to say that. And it's got that commitment, right?
Yes.
It's not just saying, I was one way, now I'm different, only thing in between was him. It's not just saying that. Then it's followed up with, I will know him the rest of my life. Like, I will never forget that. And that's the issue that some of us, like some Christians do, some Christians make, is that we forget him, right? And that's why you get to Revelation and it says, you've forgotten your first love, return to me. Because sometimes we get hyped up on the Jesus train, and then we get distracted by worldly things. And we just go running back to the way things once were. But Mary's saying, no, I was one way, now I'm different. The only thing in between was him. I will know him the rest of my life. And it's like, that's how we should live.
Yes.
It's a very good way to where it's like, it's by faith, it's not by works. She's giving him the glory, right? She's not saying, she didn't do anything to win his attention. He was the one who reached out to her, but she says, I'm committed to him now, forever. Really, really cool stuff. Probably my favorite line from the entire of season 1. I don't know if it's my favorite scene from the entire show so far, but definitely my favorite line, because it's just beautiful picture of the gospel and beautiful picture of like a testimony to where even Nicodemus is like shaken up. He's like, whoa, I want to get to know this guy. And hopefully for you watching the show, you should want to get to know him too, because I think he's pretty cool. Even if he hasn't shown up that much in the show quite yet. Don't worry. Episode 3, literally Jesus from beginning to end. So we're good. But then she and Nicodemus, they depart. Shabbat shalom, and they leave, and they go their separate ways to prepare for Sabbath dinner stuff. And Nicodemus, he's excited, which I thought that was interesting. Because I don't know about you, but if I went to somebody thinking that I had performed this great miracle, and I thought that I was this great teacher who came from Jerusalem to receive all these accolades and stuff, I don't think I would be really excited and enthralled by the idea that some unnamed guy showed up and did what I couldn't do. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, especially because you can tell that he's really, like, Nicodemus is really invested in it, trying to figure out, okay, like, here's an issue, how am I going to solve it? I'm going to put the research into it, I'm going to figure out how to do it, and now he's going to go up to her, and she's like, oh, it's some guy with, I don't really know who his name is, I can't give you any information about him, or what he did, or how things happen, I just know it's gone, and that's how it is. I feel like, from Nicodemus' perspective, that would be very frustrating, because he seems like he wants to know what it is, so that way he can figure it out and continue to help other people. So
Yeah. The way the entire scene concludes, it's cool to me because how he responds, he's even excited because she's like, well, I've got to go prepare Sabbath dinner. And he's like, you're so healed, you can host a Sabbath dinner? Like he's so excited for her.
Yeah.
And I think that's cool because that is something that sets Nicodemus apart from a lot of the Pharisees and the Sadducees that will eventually come into Jesus' life. Because a lot of them, they're so focused on their own glory and their own pride and their own reputation that whenever they see what Jesus is doing, they're just going to get jealous.
Right.
Whereas Nicodemus, you can see that he genuinely cares for this girl.
Right.
And he's like, wow, you've been so healed that has changed you. And I really do love the character of Nicodemus to where he probably is my favorite character in the show so far just because he's so complex. In the first episode, you saw him like really shaken up by the fact that he couldn't do this, and he was really humbled. But then after having talked with his wife, she kind of talked him back on his high horse, and then he was like, oh, the reason I couldn't do it is because she was too sinful, and like only God could do it. I couldn't do it. And he kind of backtracks. But then right here, he's humbled again, and he's like some unnamed person. Like he's like, I can't even fathom how somebody wouldn't do these things for glory.
Right.
He's just so confused, and but he's still excited, and I love the characterization there because, once again, we talk about Nicodemus a whole lot. He's not really in Scripture that much. He's in John chapter 3, he's in John chapter 7, and then he shows up at the crucifixion of Jesus, right? Or like after his death. So he's only in like, I think, 3 places in the Gospel of John. He might be in there more. That's all I can think of. So Nicodemus, he's not a prevalent character in the Gospels, but how the show portrays him is very consistent with it, because in the Gospels you get this idea that Nicodemus is seeking Jesus out, but he's unwilling to commit. So whenever you see him in John chapter 3, he comes to Jesus in the dead of night, and they meet up, and you never actually get to see where Nicodemus lands. He starts asking Jesus questions, and Jesus starts kind of schooling him a little bit, and then Nicodemus just kind of drops off, and you don't get to see the conclusion. You're like, okay, interesting. So what happened there? And then whenever you get to John chapter 7, all these people are arguing about Jesus, and Nicodemus, he doesn't defend Jesus. He just comes in and says, hey, according to the law, don't we have to give him a fair chance? Right? So he's kind of teetering on the edge. And then at Jesus' crucifixion, Nicodemus will help lower him from the cross and stuff. And so finally it's like, okay, he seems to have come to Christ at that point. Right. But in between, there seems to be some teetering. And so I do like how the show, they take those few details from Scripture and they flesh it into this full character. And speaking of fleshing out characters, the next scene after that is Simon sneaking into his house, once again, for the second episode in a row. And in the first episode, he did this, and his wife seemed angry. It turns out she was joking.
Right. This time,
she's not joking.
Yeah.
So he sneaks in, and what did you think about the relationship between Simon and his wife?
Yeah, she was not happy. She was heated about that.
She was chopping the heck out of those cucumbers.
Yeah.
She was like, I was getting nervous for him.
The one line that got me was whenever she was like,
You answer to God, not me. But next time, you answer to the both of us.
Such a good line, because I was like, that's good. Like, I was like, but I want to say this because a lot of times whenever you watch shows, the drama is so petty and it's so lame. It's just contrived drama, and I feel bad for women because usually the drama starts with women in the shows and it's over just petty stuff. And if I was a woman, I'd be like, do y'all think we're that petty? Sometimes like in shows, it's just like way too dramatic.
Yeah.
But I will say, Eden, she's got a good argument here because her concern, it's mainly spiritual. She says, Simon, you're not the man I married. Like, the man I married, he would never be fishing on the Sabbath. Yeah. That's a day of rest. You're supposed to, like she's got genuine convictions about this. It's not out of just, like, this self-righteousness. It's not like you're not allowed to do anything. It's just saying, like, Simon, what are you doing? Like, this is a day, like, honor God, trust God with it. Even if we run out of money, just trust God, And I really did admire that because it's drama, but it's actually, like, it's a believable conversation. Like, if you have this marriage, and it's, especially like a Jewish culture where everything, like, even the non-religious people had some sort of religion, Nowadays, it's very easy to have relationships that are, like, you don't even mention religion. I remember I had this one friend who claimed to be a Christian, and she'd been dating this guy for, like, 3 years. I was like, well, is your boyfriend a Christian? And she was like, I don't know. I was like, are you a Christian? Like, how do you make it, as a Christian, how do you make it 3 years into a relationship and not know if they're a Christian? Like, that's, like, that first question I ask. Like, are you a Christian? But in this culture, in the Jewish culture and stuff, like, everything, it's got this religious background, even if you're not the most devout. your entire like government system is based off the law and stuff. And so she actually does seem to be a devout Jew, and she's genuinely concerned about what her husband's doing, and she's saying, hey, you know, the Sabbath, it's a time to focus on God and focus on family, and you're ditching us to go fishing. Like, I know we've got issues, but can't you put that to the side? And so she's really ticked, and I do love just that one line, you know? You enter to God and not me, but next time you enter to the both of us. And so after that, we have this quick scene where Matthew is seen walking to his family Sabbath dinner. Right, he's got a plate of food and stuff, and he's walking, and there's like a dog that's coming with him. It's his dog, and he's walking, and he walks up to the house, and he looks in, he sees his family there, and then he chickens out. Yeah, which is really sad. Yeah, because we really like Matthew, and it's a real bummer. Like, you know, the Sabbath, like we saw at the beginning of the episode, it's all about celebrating family, celebrating God, celebrating what God's done, celebrating God's people, God's promises. But Matthew, he doesn't get to share that with his family because they view him as a sellout. And in many ways, they could be right. You know, I mean, he's kind of eating the Jews on a lot of stuff. I mean, you get to see in the beginning of episode 1, you get to see how luxurious a life he's living. And he's doing that at the expense of his brothers and sisters. But I don't know, it's a hard argument to be made because, I mean, you can see where he's coming from. You can see where they're coming from. But from the Jewish perspective, bad guy. It's kind of like the teaching that Jesus has, you know, what does it do to gain the whole world but lose your soul? You know, Matthew has all these things, yet in the end we're going to see him just sitting in an alleyway eating food by himself with a dog. And it's like, oh, like he's got rows of shoes, he's got like a golden door. He can hire somebody to just like drive him to his work. But ultimately he's just kind of alone, and that's sad. Because he's just trying to make a living, and you're like, oh. But his family's disowned him. The Romans don't like him. The Jews don't like him. The only two people who seem to like him are Quintus and Gaius. Gaius just because he's getting used to him, and then Quintus because he wants to use his intelligence. Correct. But yeah, so it's kind of a sad moment. And then we cut back to Nicodemus' Sabbath dinner, and Nicodemus, you know, he's having to put on a show, and he's not having it. Yeah. His wife is boasting about how they have all the finest materials and all this stuff because, you know, it's like an honor-shame culture. It's like saying, hey, like, look at all the great things we have. And then while they're talking about this, she sees Nicodemus looking over at this tapestry hanging on the wall, and he calls her over, and he says, do you know where this tapestry comes from? And she's like, what is it? And he's like, well, it's Hasmonean in design. And he actually gives a little history recap. And he says, do you know about the Hasmoneans? And she's like, tell me. And really, this is a moment where I think she's just playing the part of the audience, because I can guarantee you that every single Jew in the first century would have known who the Hasmoneans are. A lot of, like, we don't really talk about them that much because this is a story that takes place in between the two testaments. It takes place between the Old Testament and the New Testament. But it's the story of the Maccabees. Basically, between the Old Testament and New Testament, Israel and Judah, like, they were just in this massive fluctuation. Going back and forth between the Ptolemies and the Seleucids, these two empires. And eventually this guy named Antiochus Epiphanes takes over, and he just starts doing some terrible stuff. And this Jewish family named the Maccabees, they rise up and they lead a revolt against Antiochus Epiphanes and basically run the foreign powers out of Israel. And so then they have this celebration at the end of this, right? Because what they do is they rededicate the temple in December, and henceforth, Jews now celebrate this festival called Hanukkah. Right? It's called the Feast of Dedication. That's not actually a feast that was created in the Bible. It was actually created in between the Old and New Testament. And it's called the Feast of Dedication. It's called Hanukkah. We celebrate it around Christmas time. We don't. I'm not a Jew. But, I mean, I guess you could if you wanted to. But they celebrate it around Christmas time, and that's the story that he's telling his wife. So I can guarantee you that she knew that story, but for the purpose of the audience knowing that story, he shares it with her.
200 years ago, we were ruled by the Greek king Antiochus IV. He suppressed our religious observances. It wasn't until the Maccabees revolted and ushered in the Hasmonean dynasty that our worship was restored.
And he tells her this story because he's saying, who is repressing our worship now? Right? And in a way, he's saying that their system is. Right? Because their system is all about exalting people. And exalting people like him, specifically. And he's like, this is messing up our worship now. I wonder who it is. And she's like, you just need to calm down, yada, yada, yada. He says, well, I've got a feeling I know the answer. And so people come up and they knock on the door, as if to prove his point, right? And they say, Honored Rabbi, we're so glad that you would be here in Capernaum, and we're so glad that you would invite us to your house because you make us whole. Mm-hmm. And this is when Nicodemus, in the most deadpan way possible, he just looks at them and he says,
Only God can do that.
Uh-huh.
And you're like, go Nicodemus! Mm-hmm. You know, I mean, very rude. Not the best way to welcome guests over. They're just trying to pay you a compliment. Mm-hmm. But theologically, it's correct.
It's true.
I'll give him kudos there.
Yeah.
Because they walk in and they're like, oh, you make us whole. He's like, only God can do that. Mm-hmm. Back off.
His wife's back there like rolling his eyes. Like, really? I know that you're going to say it to another guest.
Yeah,
Come
she's
on.
like, oh my gosh, like, what did I tell you? You got to perform. You got to do the right thing. And he's just not having it. And so they welcome him in and they start having the meal. And, you know, he starts quoting the Eshet Chayil. Mm-hmm. You know, a woman of virtue who can find. Mm-hmm. Is that what it is? Yeah. But so he starts quoting the Eshet Chayil. And then it cuts. And now we are at one of the final scenes of the episode. Yeah. We finally got there. Don't worry. And now we're at Mary's house.
Yes.
Right? And she is setting stuff up. Mm-hmm. She's got the table laid out. And people begin to show up at her house. Mm-hmm. Right? And so there's this guy named Barnaby who comes in. What do you think of Barnaby?
He's witty.
Yeah.
He's
a
funny.
witty guy.
Yeah.
I really liked his character. He's not actually based on anybody in the Bible. It's probably just a random guy. Barnaby walks in, and he is shortly followed by this blind woman who is named Shula. Mm-hmm. And so they're just kind of different characters. You kind of see the contrast between Mary's house and Nicodemus's. Mm-hmm. Nicodemus has all the highest ranked people, the most respected people, whereas Mary has, just got this random dude named Barnaby and Shula. And Shula, the blind girl, she even jokes around that Barnaby himself jokes around about how he never gets invited to these. He says, I go to a lot of Sabbath dinners.
This is the person I got invited to.
Yeah. So they show up. And then two other people walk in. And Mary's kind of like, who are y'all? And how do y'all know about this? And they introduce themselves as James and Thaddeus. And they say, we were actually told that this would be a good place to come. And you're like,
okay.
Come in. That's fine. You don't think too much of it. You're just like, okay, I guess somebody was like, oh yeah, you should go there. And like, okay. So they show up, they offer to help, and she's like, yeah, I don't really know what I'm doing. And they're like, well, hey, you got food on the table, so you're doing a good job so far. And so they ask her, who's that extra seat for?
Oh, yeah.
And she says, that seat's for Elijah. Because you're supposed to set that out, right? And they say, well, that's actually just for Passover. And that is actually a true statement. Even to this day, whenever they set up for the Passover, they do leave an open seat for Elijah. Because if you remember, at the end of the Old Testament, which, remember, for Jews, the Old Testament is the Bible. So it can also be called the Hebrew Bible. We have the New Testament, so our Bible ends with Revelation. Their Bible ends with a book called Malachi. And Malachi ends with this promise from God saying, I will send Elijah, the prophet, to you to welcome in the day of the Lord. And so the final promise that God gave to the people of Israel at the conclusion of their Bible is that Elijah's coming. And so to this day, at the Passover, they'll leave a seat open for Elijah. And some of them will even, before they eat their meal and before they pray and everything, they'll go and they'll open the door and look out in the hallway in case Elijah's there. Which I think is kind of funny. Yeah. But it's cool. Like, they do that even to this day, right? Thousands of years later, this is still a practice. Whenever I've gone to Israel, I've actually gotten to share a Sabbath dinner with some Jewish families, and just for the experience, they'll sometimes leave a seat for Elijah open then as well, even though you don't have to on Sabbath day, like they said, but they'll do it just for us Americans, so that we get to, us American Christians, so that we get to see what it's like. And so they say, oh, you don't have to leave that, and she's like, oh, well, when Passover, whenever Passover comes, I guess I'll be ready. And so they keep talking and stuff, and then there's a knock on the door. And did you know who was coming?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, you knew who was coming? Yeah. Okay. Did you watch the whole episode before?
I did.
Okay.
But even when I watched it the first time, though, I was like, they set that up pretty well. Like, they left the seat there. I was like, surely that's about to be him at the door. Like, who else would it be? Yeah. So, yes. Even the first time I watched it. Yeah. I was kind of thinking that was going to be it.
Okay. Well, sure enough, there's a knock on the door, and lo and behold, who is it but Jesus, once again coming in for the end of the episode.
Yeah.
Right? And he shows up, and he's like, hello, Mary. And she's like, hi. And they kind of share this, like, awkward moment. And this, I love this, because once again, it's fleshing out the characters, especially the character of Jesus here. And he's just like, hey, so can I come in? Because they're kind of standing there awkwardly, and she's just so amazed, like, wow, what are you doing here? And he's like, I don't know, thought I'd drop in for the, for Sabbath dinner. And then this is awkward. And he's like, so, can I come in? And she's like, oh yeah, my bad. And then he gets the extra seat for Elijah. Yeah. James and Thaddeus are like, Rabbi! And they stand up and they're all like super excited and you can tell they're nervous. They're like, hi, Rabbi! And she's like, you know them? And he's like, oh yes, these are my students, right? And that's because James and Thaddeus, guess what? They're going to be some of the 12 disciples. Boom. Kind of exciting stuff. Yeah. And I love that they seem nervous because classic Jesus move. He didn't tell them he was coming here. He just suggested them. He was like, hey, y'all should go to that woman's house. Yeah. And they're like, okay, whatever Rabbi says. Right. And he didn't tell them he was coming because he's Jesus, right? Jesus, he'll show up. He's like, hey. And so Mary eventually says, you know what? I never got your name. And Jesus says, I'm Jesus of Nazareth. That's the first time we've heard his name in the series, right? And then Barnaby, of course, he laughs. He's like, I guess something good can come from Nazareth. Yeah, that was funny. Which, I will say, that is actually a reference to the Gospels. It's not from Barnaby, because like I said, he's a fictional character in this. But the idea of nothing good coming from Nazareth, that was apparently a phrase that was said back then. Because the way you need to know, like, so Israel, it was laid out. There was Galilee in the north and Judea in the south. Right? And Judea, that was like the hub for like, it was more the, I guess you could say urban area, right? That's where Jerusalem and everything was at. Galilee, that was more the rural area, and it was considered more the place where the Hicks lived, right? So Jesus, he came from Galilee, right? So there's Judea, Galilee. The people of Judea, they look down on the people of Galilee. But in Galilee, there's this tiny little town called Nazareth, which basically had a population of like a few hundred. Right. It was just like on this tiny little hill. It's really big nowadays, but that's because this guy named Jesus of Nazareth, he grew up there, right? Yeah. So now it's popular. Back then, tiny little place. And apparently, even the people of Galilee looked down on Nazareth, right? So the people of Judea looked down on Galilee. The people of Galilee looked down on Nazareth. So that lets you know what people thought about Nazareth. Right. And in the Gospels, we have people saying, nothing good can come from Nazareth. And there's actually this guy named Nathaniel in the Gospel of John who... whenever Philip approaches him, and Philip's like, this is in John chapter 1, Philip's like, hey, there's this guy named Jesus of Nazareth, and he's like the promised one from God. And Nathaniel's like, what good can come from Nazareth? Yeah. And then Philip's like, come and see. And so whenever Barnaby says something good can come from Nazareth, Jesus flashes a wink. And once again, I just love the characterization of Jesus here because so many shows, they make him not a person, right? And I do like the way, I think his name's Jonathan Rumi. I like how he plays Jesus because it's a guy, you can see the emotion there, you can see the compassion, but I could also see him getting mad when he needs to get mad. Right. I could see him being stern. We haven't gotten really to any of those places in The Chosen yet, or really in season 1. I don't think we get to see a lot of sternness from him. But hopefully they will put that in there. Like, hopefully they don't just skip those passages. I don't think they will. Yeah. But I do like how he plays Jesus because he plays him like a real person. And that's the important thing. Because so many times in shows, they just kind of portray Jesus as like a Buddha-like figure who is just like, blessed are the poor in spirit, for those are the kingdom of heaven. And like, he's just very like monotoned and very like transcendent. Which, to be fair, he is God in the flesh, right? So he is the transcendent creator. But the whole point of the incarnation, when Jesus became flesh, the whole point is that he became man. Right. And so he had emotions. There was nothing about him that would cause people to turn their face, right? Nobody was looking and being like, oh, that dude's definitely God in the flesh. The whole point is that when they saw him, they saw a regular man. And it was his teachings and his actions that testified to him being something greater, right? And so I love the way that he plays him. It's very, Jesus just like flashing a wink. And there's more stuff as the show progresses where they add little details in there that I love because it makes Jesus real. And really, you've commented on this when it comes to the characterization. The show does a really good job at fleshing out these characters in a way that makes them real, in a way that sometimes when we read the Bible, we don't do. And it helps because they give the characters backstories and stuff, which aren't given in Scripture. Because Scripture, the main focus of Scripture isn't to give us a detailed biography of Jesus or his disciples. It's to give us what we need to know to have a right relationship with God. Right? All Scripture is for the purpose of directing us to God and giving us the tools we need to relate to him properly. And so it's not giving us these like detailed, vast accounts. It's telling us this is what you need to know. This is why it's important. But whenever we read Scripture, we need to remember these are real people who lived in real time, and they did have backstories we don't know about. But it led them to these moments where they encountered Jesus and their lives changed forever. And every person who places their faith in Jesus, they're radically changed. And so it's cool to see that Jesus is just like this. He's portrayed as just a regular guy. He just shows up out of nowhere, right? That's what I do like about our introduction to him.
Right.
He just comes in to where whenever you're watching for the first episode and they're in the tavern, you don't see Jesus walking up behind.
Yeah.
He's just in the background, and then he just puts his hand on her hand. He's like, "That's not for you," and you're like, "Oh, it's Jesus." And then even right here, they're just like having a good time, and they don't even realize as they're joking around about like Barnaby and stuff like that. They don't realize that God in the flesh is walking down the street to their door.
Yeah.
That's so cool. I love that idea that it's just he's just hidden. He just fits in with the crowd. And we're going to see more of that in the third episode and everything. So I just really love that. And she tries to get him to read because she's like, "Oh, you're this amazing rabbi. Like, you should read." And he says, "No, this is your house. You should read."
Yeah.
And I was like, that's a Jesus response there. That's probably not something that many people would have responded back then, right? Nicodemus probably wouldn't have even allowed his wife to read because he's like, "No, I'm the leader of the house." But Jesus says, "This is your house. You do that." And I thought that was cool. Then, basically, after that scene, it cuts to just this quick compilation where we get to see all of them celebrating their Sabbaths in their various different ways, right? So Nicodemus, he's with the crowd at his house, and he's just obviously troubled, but he's just doing things. He's giving the performance, right? He's quoting the prayers, and he's doing all that stuff. He's reading from Genesis, reciting it. And then you have Mary at their place, and then you have Simon with his wife, and his wife is visibly troubled, and she's just, like, upset.
Yeah.
And then you have poor Matthew just by himself with the dog. And you're like, oh. And then we have one final scene at the very end where Simon is out at the Sea of Galilee, right? Or at Lake Gennesaret. And a troop of Romans approach him from behind. And then the episode cuts. And it's like, ooh, dun, dun, dun. Basically, they have come to get a report from him. And so we'll have to see where that leads. But there's episode 2. There is Shabbat. What did you think about the episode?
Yeah, I really liked it. I think one of my favorite things, which I said, I think towards the beginning of the episode, was when we were talking about characterization, things like that. You kind of already mentioned it, but how they portray everyone as real people. Because a lot of times, like you were saying, whenever we read the Bible, we think of it from purely historical kind of standpoint. And we're like, oh, they meant business all the time. They were always serious, but they actually have, like, humor. They have lives. They have wives and children and all those types of things. So, yeah, I really liked they did that. And then I also liked that out of any of the dinners, the Sabbath dinners that Jesus could have went to, I like that he went to Mary's. Because with someone who is as prestigious as him, and he's aware of it, but he's a humble person, he could have went to Nicodemus because, I mean, that's where, all these high people are. They're all going there, people that are rich and all those kind of things. But he wants to go to Mary's but that's like almost the lowest one whenever we compare all of them together. And he's like, no, like I'm gonna go to that one. This is her, her first Sabbath dinner, and like this is important. I'm gonna go sit there, even though he's fully capable of going to Nicodemus. If you
especially if he had shown up and been like, hey, I was the guy who healed that girl.
Exactly.
That would be the quickest way to go to superstardom, right? You got all the people there you need. So
yeah.
And then going back to the characterization thing that you just mentioned, I know I already just harped a lot about it, but I think a lot of the times, whenever we read scripture, sometimes we make a mistake by reducing it to purely a theological text.
Right.
Because it is, right? Like, we don't want to get that, like, we don't want to make the mistake of not treating it like that. Like, I believe that scripture is inspired by God, it is authoritative, it is inerrant, I believe all that stuff. But sometimes, I think especially as theologians or just as people trying to seek theology out of it, we make the mistake of just treating it almost like it's a theological textbook. And because of that, we drain it of the emotion. We drain it of anything other than just, just almost like an essay. That's basically what we reduce it to where we're like, okay, I'm just going to analyze this. And we forget to read it as literature, right? And that's why I've got this one book called The Humor of Jesus by Elton Trueblood. It's like, it was written a while back. It's a super short book. I don't agree with everything in it. Sometimes he actually takes it too far. But he's actually analyzing different ways that Jesus implemented humor throughout his teachings to actually make a point across. Like, for instance, whenever he's saying, why do you point out the speck in your brother's eye whenever you got a plank in your own? A lot of times we're like, oh, well, you see, what he's talking about is if you have a speck in your eye that's tiny, and like we like just analyze it to death.
Yeah. When
a child can hear that, and if a child hears that, he's going to laugh. Because he gets the point without you having to, like, overanalyze it. He's like, well, that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Like, if you got a plank over your eye, how could you point out the speck in your brother's eye? Like, that's funny stuff.
Yeah.
Whereas sometimes, like, we take ourselves a little too seriously, and we drain Jesus of the emotion, and as a result, we almost miss the point. The point is that it's ridiculous to do that, right? It's not like, oh, well, you know, if you think about it really deeply, you'll realize the hypocrisy of your actions. No, the point is that anybody can realize that's ridiculous. Don't point out the speck in your brother's eye when you got a plank in your own. And so I really like that book was good. I also just recently purchased a book called The Character of Jesus. I haven't read it yet. Maybe it's good. I have no idea. But I like stuff like that because, you know, like I said, I got saved when I was 5. I've been studying scripture for 18 years now, and I'm hoping to be studying it for the rest of my life, however long that may be. But as a result of that, sometimes, you know, you read the stories over and over again, and your ears become, like, dull to it.
Yeah.
And you just start reading it as just, you know, theological text, like, what can I learn from this? Yada, yada, yada. Like, just, what can I get from this? And we just almost start treating it like this magic bag to draw stuff from, rather than realizing this is the Word of God. Yeah. This is God communicating something to us. Like, if somebody were to write you a love letter, you wouldn't read that as like, ooh, let me, like, analyze this and see, like, exactly what I can get out of it. You'd be like, let me read the emotion that this person's writing into this. Like, yes, I'm going to read what they're saying as true words directed towards me, and I'm going to recognize that they mean those words, but I'm also going to read the emotion into that, because they put their emotion in those words as well. And so whenever you read scripture, that's why whenever we're doing our Bible studies, a lot of the times when we're going through narrative, I'll be like, okay, close your eyes and imagine you're one of the characters.
Yes. Step into the shoes of them and see from their perspective how they would be thinking in that moment.
Yeah, like whenever Jesus comes up to the woman at the well in John chapter 4, imagine you're this woman, right? Imagine that you've been trying to avoid these people, and this guy, this Jew no less, comes up to you and starts approaching you and starts bringing up, like, all this stuff. You keep trying to avoid this conversation, and he just keeps rolling with it, and you're not getting away from it. Imagine how frustrated you'd be. And, like, you can step into that, and you don't want to go too far. You don't want to, like, just, like, dive into empty speculation. But I think you do want to interact with the text, and I think the show does a really good job of helping you do that by giving these, like, you know, fictional backstories and stuff that make you realize, basically by doing that, whenever you get to the stuff that actually happens in Scripture, and you get to see how these characters react, then you're thinking, how would I react to that? Because now you know their backstories, you're like, okay, well, with my backstory, how would I react? And so I think that's really cool. And that's also why, once again, I want to do videos like this, because I want to distinguish between what is fictional, what, like, where's all this stuff coming from? What's from the Bible? So far, we have had nothing that is directly from Scripture except for Mary having demons cast out of her, which is just very briefly glossed over in, like, one verse in Scripture. But once we move on, eventually we're going to get to stories. I think, like, in episode 4, we're going to actually get to Bible stories. Episode 3, still just kind of rolling with it, getting to know the characters. In episode 3, we get to know Jesus more. But overall, I gave episode 1 a 3 out of 5. Not because it's bad, because what I'm doing is I'm ranking these in view of the whole season. Okay. Right? So I'm saying, out of the whole season, where would I rank this? And I think that every single one of the episodes is really good. Right? So even if I give it a 1, that's not me saying it's bad, it's me saying it's the weakest of the episodes, right? So, 3 out of 5 was for the first one, because I was saying it's an average episode compared to all the rest in the season. Yeah. For you, you've only seen the 2 episodes. Yes. So, off the information you know, how would you rate the first episode?
Yeah, I would agree with 3. I think because if you didn't have it, you wouldn't, you know, get the basis of the characters and just kind of, like, the groundwork, the foundation. So I think it's an important episode, but just knowing based off of, like, things that you've said of what's coming in the future, I would not rate it like a 4 or 5. Yeah, so I think a 3, that's good. It's like middle ground, you need it, but it's not, like, amazing. Right?
Okay, and then how would you rank this episode?
Okay, I think I'd give it a 4.
Okay.
Yeah, because I like it more than the first episode. But I don't want to give it a 5 yet, because it's only the second episode. So 4, but it could be a 5, maybe. But 4 for now.
Yeah, and I would agree with the whole season in perspective. I would give this a 4 out of 5 as well. And the main reason why is I really, really like this episode. I just can't give it a 5 because, I don't know, I'd feel weird giving a 5 out of 5 to a show about Jesus when the stuff in the show was not directly from Scripture. You know what I mean? Yeah. So I have to reserve a 5 for one of the later episodes that's actually adapting key moments from Scripture. Because then, if they do it well, there you go. That's a 5 out of 5. Because you managed to do it. If they do it poorly, there we go. But I'd give this one a 4 out of 5 because I think it's a really good episode that's consistent with all the characters that we know. and it builds off of them and sets up some good situations that are going to pay off later on. So I'd also give it a 4 out of 5. So there is episode 2 of The Chosen. Thank you, Brienne, for being on with me.
Yeah.
Hopefully you'll come back for another one of these. I'm going to try to have different people on for The Chosen show just so that we can have more people watch it.
Yeah.
But we'll still get some Smallville videos in at some point and stuff. But yeah, that being said, episode 2 of The Chosen, 4 out of 5 from the both of us. And we will see you when we get to episode 3 at some point in the future.
Yes.
Until then, I'm David.
And I'm Brienne.
And this is Now Let's Be Honest About Movies. See y'all later.
Okay, one more thing that I thought of. Another note. So the one quote that Mary said earlier, you have it word for word so we don't...
I was one way, and now I'm completely different, and the thing that happened in between was him. So yes, I will know him for the rest of my life.
Yes. So there was this illustration that I saw one time, and it made me think of it whenever I heard that. So it was this picture of like a guy standing on a cliff over here, and then there's another cliff over here, and there's a huge chasm in between. And, you know, he tries to jump, but he's always just a little too short to where he can't make it. Tries to throw a rope, and is just a little too short to where, you know, he wouldn't be able to walk across. And the only thing that's able to get him from one side to the other is this bridge that was built. But he didn't build the bridge, because how would you get out there to build the bridge, right? And it's floating too. It's not supported on the ground by anything. It's just a bridge, and it's labeled, you know, having, you know, full trust, full faith in God. And so it made me think of that whenever I heard that.
Yeah, a common illustration that we used to use. I used to be part of the navigators at Texas A&M University. Illustration would be the cross, and literally it'd be the same thing. It'd be like this chasm,
I've
and then
seen
like
that too.
you would try to stack stuff up, and it'd always just be like, you know, it'd be basically water you're going to drown in. You know, you'd be like wealth, pleasure, all these things. Would it work? But then you put the cross, and you get to walk right across it, and you're like, boom. And it's like life and death, like, you know, self, God. Or, you know, you could throw some Phil Wickham in there. How great the chasm.
Yes.
Yeah. Phil Wickham, he's actually partnering with The Chosen, and he's going to...
I saw that.
Yeah, he's doing something with them for season 2. Like, they have a Christmas special coming up on December 13th, I think. So it's probably already out by the time this video is coming out. It is out because we're recording this on December 11th, and I can guarantee you this is not coming out on December 13th.
Yeah.
But no, that is a good illustration because, you know, it's the idea that we were one way, now we're another, right? We were dead in our sin, now we're alive in Christ.
Yes.
Right? That's the beautiful story there, and it all comes from what he did. Specifically at the cross, which we'll eventually get to if they get their full 7 seasons of this show in there. That's what they're wanting to do.
Yeah.
And I'm there for it, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, so, yeah. All right, well, now we're done. You have anything else to say?
Side note has been completed.
Side note has been completed. All right, well, bye for the second time.
Yes.
אשת חיל מי ימצא, ורחוק מפנינים ממך, בטח בלבלה, משלל לא יחסר. מלאתו טוב ולא